Right.
But I knew the feeling we had,
Right.
and I trusted that.
It's beautiful because purpose, what you're describing, is really the ability to appreciate the process and the journey. And we have with us here one of our clinical directors at our Malibu campus and the clinical director of Conscious Health and Wellness. And we're going to talk to Ian Howard. So many people strive and yearn for meaning and purpose. It's a major buzzword. You're one of those people who I see every day is so aligned with their purpose. It expresses itself in the serenity and sort of the tranquility that you consistently exude. And it's inspiring to see.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how you got there. What does it look like for you? And maybe any tips or insight that somebody watching this would be able to say, you know, this is something that can help me align and find my purpose.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the compliment.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that for me, I look at purpose as meaningfulness. So what do you find meaning in? And I also think that that can be state of mind dependent. Because as you said, I can look and appear tranquil, but sometimes I can feel a little bit out of sorts, right? But I think what I really try to tap into is this like faith and wisdom that I'm kind of moving always towards that goal or that thing that I've, set up, this idea of purpose or this thing that I'm looking forward to doing. And that sometimes I can feel like I do get off track of that. But I know that in the next moment, I can refine that purpose, and I think that really helps learning that as a therapist. Because when you're working with clients, it can feel hard. Someone that you get in that first day, you sit with them for an assessment, you can feel their hopelessness. But what always helps me is to remember that, at the end of that time with me and with my staff and with Monterre, they're going to be a different person. And I've seen it time and time again. So even when I feel a little bit out of sorts with, this is going to go great, I think that can feel like what purpose is. Oh, this is going to go great. I trust this. Even when I get off track of that, I just remember that I'm being guided in some ways, and I'm helping people find that for themselves.
That's beautiful. And would you say that there were certain experiences in your life that led you to seek this specific purpose out? Or is this something that, as a 5-year-old, you were playing therapist with your friends at school?
No. Well, funny enough, my father is a psychologist. And so I did not necessarily think I'd go into the family business per se. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I love the way that he looked at people's health and people's wellness. He was a classically trained, psychoanalyst, psychologist. And in the early 80s, he found this different way of doing therapy that was guided by spiritual principles. And so I saw him, give talks and go around the world and do that. And I really loved that. And when I got into college, went to Berkeley, it felt I really had this really great idea of psychology, and it was a little different, kind of looking at, Freud and different things. And I just wasn't me. It wasn't me. So I went into ethnic studies, sociology, and did that. And then eventually, working in different facets, I was running helping to run a residential treatment for kids in foster care. And I had a really good connection with them, really good rapport, and all these things I've kind of heard from my dad and his colleagues, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. And I saw therapists coming in. And I thought to myself, well, if I take what I know and couple it with that, maybe I can really have a change with people. Maybe I can affect some change. And that's what led me to doing therapy. But even in that, once I got my master's, I was in a band, and we moved down here, and I was in a band for a couple of years. So I wasn't doing any therapy.
Which instrument?
I was like lead vocalist.
Lead vocalist? That's awesome.
Yeah. So a little bit of instruments, but that was always, speaking of purpose, I also think that it can be multifaceted, right? I do have a purpose. I think that, I'm a healer. And that's always been something I've been striving to find a way to do for people. But I also see it as a creative endeavor because I also see myself as a creative person, someone who's writing, someone who's tapping into that energy. But I think that's really helped. I've melded, I think, two purposes. One of healing and one of creating. And I think they're very similar. And I think that's what gives me a little bit of, like you said, a uniqueness in some ways, right? Of being able to see health as a creative journey, one that we're creating moment to moment, like life. And that helps me just believe in not just myself, but other people's ability to find wellness and health and good feeling.
That's so profound. And that actually explains why so often I'll speak to a client of yours after a session and they will feel like a different person. It's that creative spirit, that ability for them to be able to tap into a place where there is a certain fluidity, where they can grow, where they're not boxed, and there's an absence of that rigidity of this is why that happened to you. Yeah. There's more of a dynamic interface, and I love that you're combining different purposes, as you've said, because that alignment and figuring out like sort of how all of the different beautiful talents and the different facets that you have, how they can not only not be compartmentalized, but they can join forces to empower and elevate the quality of everything that you're doing with bringing all of your uniquenesses to the table. I think that's something that a lot of people need to hear. So often we have different sort of facets, different dimensions, and we're not sure how they connect. And because we're not sure how they connect, we sort of isolate them. Yeah. And there's so much treasure in really breaking those walls down and those barriers and saying, how can this empower my gift of what I'm already doing?
Yeah. I think that's so important. I think that you're right. We kind of silo our talents, and I think what I've learned and what I've really come to terms with is that I'm multidimensional.
That's right.
And I love different things. And they don't have to be mutually exclusive. And there were times where I really was, when I felt that way. There were, it hasn't always been this way, right? I would go into creative spaces as an artist, and people would say, well, what do you do? And I wouldn't tell them I was a therapist all the time, because people would then be like, oh, can you, they get into like, how about, we'll tell, I have this mom and she's really, so I kind of, sometimes I would hide that piece. And even when I was a therapist, I wouldn't always tell people how creative I was. But I've learned to come to be in love with what gifts I've been given, and to just really move with their guidance.
Right.
And that's what I think purpose is for me, is not being too directive, because it's out there for all of us, our purpose. And sometimes we can feel like we have to grab it and really control it and direct it. And I feel like it has its own intelligence. It has its own intelligence. And so it will guide us. It'll offer opportunities. We're like, I was been reflecting, I've been with Monterre for 3 years, just this December. And I think it's the longest I've been, or I know, it's the longest I've been really anywhere in my professional career.
Wow.
And I thought about just our journey together, here. And how I was kind of reflecting today even on how I came to this space upstairs to,
That's right.
To meet Elliot and then to meet you and Elliot, and just that feeling. I think that's what propelled me here.
I feel like you were wearing a very formal suit jacket.
I was wearing a suit jacket.
Suit jacket, yeah. It was a pretty sharp suit jacket.
It was,
I remember that.
I think it was, if I have a friend who's a tailor, so he has some nice stuff.
I remember that. Hundreds of people later and 3 years later, that was a sharp jacket.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad you remember it. But I think, that again, I was I wasn't sure what my next steps were, but I let the feeling that we had together guide me. I said, this feels good.
Right.
And you just go with that. And that's all you can do. You can't always know the future. I think
That's
we
right.
want to know. It's a beautiful thing to know that, but it's hard to know. We can't. All you can do is kind of trust that feeling you're having. If it's a good feeling between someone, you go with it.
Right.
You know,
I think you're exposing a whole dimension of depth with purpose that is very often overlooked. There is a certain tranquility in trusting the process because you are in sync with your purpose. It almost precludes or takes away the responsibility of dictating the outcome of any given venture and project. And it also takes away the sort of heaviness of being in control. And when we're sort of in sync with our purpose, what I'm hearing from you is it lends a certain sort of fluidity that, yes, it could change a little bit here and there and how it exactly manifests. But as long as I'm with that purpose, there's a certain relief, there's a certain, you know, relaxation that comes from sort of that surrender of being in control of the outcome, knowing that I'm living with my purpose in the here and the now.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a euphoria. It's a liberating experience.
Yeah, it's freeing.
It's
like you
freeing.
said.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's freeing to not feel like you are, that it has to all be you,
Right.
you know, that there's other forces at work that we don't always see that allow that. And, you know, there's just kind of, I don't know, not to get too profound, but like there's like a, you know, my belief is that there's like a, you know, a universe that's kind of just there for us.
Right. Right.
And when we find purpose, it's being shown to us, and that path is kind of already laid. And we just want to, I always tell people, you just want to try and be mindful that things that give you doubt and may have you question these things, that's part of life. But you don't have to follow that feeling, because what you're really looking for is the good feeling, like we talked about.
Right.
That's what you're keying into.
Right.
This feels good, then that's right. And that's all you can know, because you can't know how it's going to turn
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
You know, I couldn't have known that day that you and I would share 3 years together helping people. I couldn't know that.
Right.
But I knew the feeling we had.
Right.
And I trusted that.
It's beautiful because purpose, what you're describing, is really the ability to appreciate the process and the journey. It takes the journey from being a Uber ride or a flight from A to point B, and then everything in the interim is just a mechanism to get there as a means to an end, and it turns life into a cruise where the journey is the destination. Because if you're living in purpose and you're living in flow, you're able to be just mindful. And yes, we all have outcomes that we're striving for, aspiring towards, but the process itself, when I'm living in sync with my purpose, that becomes such a powerful destination in and of itself.
Yeah.
And you live by that, and I see that. Yeah. You know, when you look at somebody who exhibits that level of serenity, they're clearly living in the destination.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that. It made me think of, like, for me personally, I used to really have a fear of flying. And yet I would deal with it and go all over the, you know, go and travel, and it didn't limit me in that way, but it limited me in those 6, 12, 4, 3, however long I was on that flight. It was kind of, it sucked.
Yeah.
It wasn't great. And I heard, I was just looking, happened to look at a YouTube thing, or I don't know where it was, but it might have been on Instagram, but it was like a pilot talking about safety and all these kind of different things. But one thing he talked about is like, when you're on the plane, just think about how much fun you're going to have in your destination. And it seemed so stupid. I was like, that's not going to help me. But the funny thing was, I was recently on a flight to Paris, and I heard that, and it just kind of relaxed me a bit. This idea of, I mean, like in some ways, that was one place where I wasn't living what we're talking about, where I'm trusting. I wasn't trusting in those moments. I wasn't able to say, like, there's something guiding me. I'm supposed to be on a plane to wherever, to see loved ones, to see, you know. It felt like that was opposite. And I think what I found was, oh, I can, just like anything else, I can key into this understanding about just being a little more mindful of trust.
Trusting and appreciating the process. You know,
Yeah.
pop culture really has it out for us in this regard, because when you watch a movie or when you look at somebody's social media feeds, all you're seeing is this really carefully curated series of highlights. Life is not highlights.
Yeah.
Most of life is in between the highlights.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
And so you never see all the downtime, which is the majority of life, when you watch an inspiring movie or when you look at someone's social media feed. And it can cause us to like get bored or not really find meaning and purpose
Yeah.
in that downtime. But finding the meaning and purpose in that downtime is the most exhilarating experience.
Sure. I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about writer's block. And one of the producers was saying that he used to, when he was writing a song or anything like that, he used to be really active. So he would do things like he would go to a writing class, or he would, read a book, or he would do something really active to engage his mind, to engage in this, process. And he found it didn't help.
It didn't help.
Didn't help. And what he started doing is, out of exasperation, he started taking walks, hikes. And when he was hiking, all of it would land. It would just land and he would start writing. And this was before phones, so he didn't have anything to write on. And so he started bringing a pad with him when he would hike, and he would be sitting on other people are hiking up the hill and he's writing. And what he said I thought was really profound. He said, it's not that those other things weren't working per se. It's just what I started doing is trusting that I'm always writing, even in my downtime when I'm watching a movie or I'm with my kids or I'm, watching a football game. My mind is writing, and when I'm quiet enough, it lands.
Wow.
And I just felt like, wow, that is powerful.
That is.
What a powerful way to see, like what you're saying, downtime. That even in the downtime, maybe our mind is still working. We don't have to be like, okay, I got to put my kid down and now write down the 6 things I need.
Yeah.
Maybe we can just take a moment, because when it's ready to land, it'll land. And that's really helped me with things like this, like feeling like, am I prepared for something? Am I ready to speak? Am I ready to?
Right.
I just I've allowed that. If it's right before, if I get the inspiration right before, okay. And if I get it a week before, great. But I'm not going to be too concerned with when I get it.
That's so beautiful. Let's talk about role models for a second.
Sure.
When you think about a role model or somebody who's inspired your perception of what it means to live a purposeful life, who comes to mind?
I think my dad comes to mind. Just seeing him believing in the fact that his life is being guided has always helped me feel reassured, especially when I was like a teenager. You're going through that stuff, and he always would kind of just be reassuring. And I think that reassurance was because he felt like he was living his purpose, right?
Right.
And so he felt reassured by the world, and then I in turn felt that way.
Wow.
I think another one would be, some poets that I've met along the way. A poet that I knew at Berkeley, June Jordan, and I didn't have a lot of, I was writing, but I wasn't really doing a lot. I didn't have faith in my writing. I had faith in my ability to perform. What I used to do was called freestyling. I don't know,
Sure.
So I was pretty good at that, but I could not get those thoughts on paper. I tried everything. I'd record myself and then I would write it down. I'm like, I don't like it. But she really taught me how to write and how to reduce that internal dialogue that had me limited. Because what she always said is like, you can write because you're writing. And I thought that was always really profound.
Yeah.
And I think she had lived her purpose of helping people find their purpose in writing. She could spot a writer too. I mean,
Wow.
to get into her class, you had to be able to write, and be a poet. And she had faith in people, I think, that didn't know they were writers. How can you spot that in a person? I think you just, you have faith that your feeling of potential for somebody is in line. And so I always just marveled at how she could find that in people.
Wow.
I think that's important too. I don't know, maybe trusting people who have faith in you, really
Yeah.
trusting that they have the wisdom to see your potential.
Yes. And to surround yourself by those types of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
The people in your environment, that comfort or that belief that they have in you is inspiring. And it's a position, we position ourselves for success.
Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, don't be in a toxic environment. No, be more ambitious. Surround yourself with people who believe in you,
Yeah. And have faith that what they say is coming from a place of genuineness and knowing you.
Right.
And not just, people will say, well, they of course they love me. They are going to see the best. They're going to say the right things. But I think they just see us in our purest form.
That's beautiful. Would you say there were any periods or moments in time where you had real setbacks on a lot of the progress that you've had as far as purpose, as far as where you felt you were going? And during those crucial moments of doubt and uncertainty, what was it that kept you from falling, that kept you on track? Our GPS, we go the wrong way. Recalculating. How did you manage to recalibrate during those moments?
Yeah. Well, I think, like you said, you just, or like we were just saying, that the people around you.
The support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the support, and then being open to things that are coming our way. That's what it was. For me, it was, I can think of 2 times in my life where that occurred. After the band kind of went a different direction, and I pivoted to therapy.
Right.
I was like, do I really want to do this?
Right.
And then another time within, after getting my license and then feeling like, what am I going to do now? And there was some other things going on, and just 2 things I did. I just was, the people around me, I just had faith and, like listened to them and sometimes they offered up some good advice, sometimes bad advice. But,
Right.
but, you just kind of, you take what you hear and you get a good feeling for. And then I just looked for opportunity. Like, where's an opportunity? I may kind of, I also realized that I may be sour on an opportunity because of my state of mind.
Right.
Because I was a bit feeling lost. So remembering, like, this opportunity's here. Let me go that direction. Because maybe right now I'm feeling a bit sour on it, because I'm just sour.
Right.
I'm sour on a lot of things because I feel a little bit I'm not in, like you said, my GPS is off.
Right.
It's telling me to go right, but I hate going right.
Right.
It's never worked out. But maybe just being able to just, what I found is just say, okay, that opportunity's here and it's here for me. Let me take it. If it sucks, I can pivot. Doesn't mean I have to follow this path. And oftentimes, and in both instances, doing that led me to the movement.
That's beautiful.
One of the things that really helps me when I'm having a crisis of purpose or I feel like I've lost my way is to do 2 things. One is to, look at the people around me and ask them to be a little bit of a cheerleader for me and to listen to what they have to say and their opinions and take the good with the bad and have faith that they're there for that. And the second one is to be open to opportunities and to know that in that place where I feel like I'm in crisis or I don't have my purpose, I may be looking at these opportunities in a kind of a negative way.
Yeah.
And so I want to be open to them and say, well, this may be a path I want to follow.
I think that both of those 2 things that you just referenced have a very common core, and that is humility. Yeah. It takes humility to not trust my current temperament and to recognize that I may be feeling this way because of environmental reasons, because I'm having a bad day, not giving that much credence or significance to the specific way that I feel on any given day. That takes a certain degree of humility. Be able to recognize that there's outside factors that can have a temporary degree of control over my feelings. And that's something I have to take into consideration and not necessarily over-attribute significance to a temporary feeling. And the second thing that you described, reaching out to the people around for support, having the humility to be able to say, I need to receive today. Today I need a boost. You know, giving and receiving are such powerful tools, and so often we're good at one and not the other. It's so much easier to give, I think, for a lot of people than to receive, and to be an elegant receiver. You know, not talking about like codependency, but just to recognize there are times when we need to receive, open ourselves up, to be able to have that humility to reach out to those in our corner and say, today's one of those days.
Or even colleagues, you know, or people that we know. You know, you can be honest with people too.
Yes.
You know, people don't have to be your close loved ones. They can be someone you know in an industry that you're looking to be involved in, and say just that. I'm really looking to be involved, or being honest. You know, my private practice is not as lucrative. I'd love to see what you have going on.
That's right.
And people are open. People are open when you are, you know, you don't have to always be, I think sometimes we think we have to be always okay. And sometimes we can not be.
That's right.
And I don't mean that in like we express our crisis to everybody or something like that, but more like we can be honest with people.
There's nothing shameful about not having a good day.
Or not knowing your way in that moment. Because sometimes people will say, no, of course, here's your purpose. Duh. I know what your purpose is. You're like, oh yeah, that's right. Eyes on the prize, right?
That's right. When it comes to sports, everybody knows Wayne Gretzky. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, but people don't really translate or apply that idea in a behavioral context that, you know, shots in daily life is not going to look like what it looks like on the sports field, but it's going to look like reaching out to the people in your orbit and communicating how you authentically feel or what you kind of are looking for in life and seeing if they can help. That's the shots in that context. So, thank you for being that force of goodness, of purpose, and being a pillar of light and a beacon of hope for so many whom you encounter, and for spreading this message out there, and for really giving a beautiful articulation to why there's light at the end of the tunnel for so many.